Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet our main character, Lily Johnson, a young woman who, at first glance, appears to have it all. She's successful, independent, and has a promising future ahead of her. She works as a marketing executive at a well-known firm, living in a sleek downtown apartment with a steady income and the freedom to do what she pleases. But despite her outward success, there's a storm brewing under the surface. Her family, though close, is deeply in debt, and her mother's recent health problems have made things even more complicated. As the sole provider, Lily finds herself trapped, struggling to balance her responsibilities, her career, and the mounting pressure of personal issues. No matter how hard she works, the financial strain seems unmanageable. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, a mysterious opportunity presents itself. A businessman, someone she's heard of but never met, contacts her with an offer that sounds too good to be true. His name is Alexander West, a self-made billionaire who has built his empire from the ground up. Alexander has no interest in love or personal connections, only in maintaining the perfect public image for his company. And to do that, he needs a fake wife, a woman to stand beside him in public, to help quell rumors, and to support his business deals. Alexander's proposal is clear: he will pay Lily handsomely in exchange for a marriage of convenience. No emotions, no strings attached. Just a contract that binds them together for a set period of time. At first, Lily is skeptical. But the offer is tempting, enough money to clear her family's debts, pay for her mother's medical treatment, and secure her future. And so, against her better judgment, she agrees. As the contract is signed, Lily steps into a world she never imagined. A world of luxury, power, and secrets. The mansion she will now call home is nothing like the modest apartment she's used to. Alexander's life, however, is far from what it seems on the surface. While he is all charm and confidence in public, behind closed doors, he's a man haunted by past regrets and locked away emotions. The agreement they've made is clear: they will live together, pose as a married couple, and avoid the prying eyes of the media. But what begins as a strictly professional arrangement soon takes a turn. Lily finds herself drawn to Alexander in a way she didn't expect. And while Alexander tries to keep things strictly business, he can't help but notice the woman standing before him is far more than just a contract. But of course, Lily can't ignore the truth about their arrangement. This was never supposed to be real. It was just business. They both agreed on that. But as days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, Lily's feelings for Alexander grow in a way she can't control. And soon, she will have to face the question that's been haunting her since the beginning: what if the lines between fake and real are blurrier than she ever imagined? So, let's pause here and think about it. Can something that started out as a lie ever turn into the truth? Or are they simply caught in a game they can't get out of? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet our main character, Lily Johnson. On the surface, she seems to have it all. She's successful, independent, and has a promising future ahead of her. She works as a marketing executive at a prestigious firm, lives in a stylish downtown apartment, and has the freedom to enjoy her life. But despite her outward success, Lily's life is far from perfect. Her family, although close-knit, is struggling financially, and her mother's recent health issues have only added to the pressure. As the primary breadwinner, Lily feels the weight of responsibility growing heavier each day. No matter how much she works, the financial strain continues to build, and she's starting to feel overwhelmed. Just when things seem like they can't get worse, an unexpected opportunity arises. A man she's heard of but never met, Alexander West, a self-made billionaire, contacts her with an unusual proposition. Alexander is known for his successful business empire, but his personal life is a mystery. He's never been interested in love or personal connections. His focus has always been on maintaining his public image and securing his business interests. To do this, he needs a fake wife. A woman who can stand by him, help him deflect rumors, and keep up appearances during important business events. Alexander's offer is simple. He will pay Lily handsomely in exchange for pretending to be his wife. It's strictly a contract, no emotions, no strings attached. Lily is hesitant at first, but the money he offers is more than enough to clear her family's debts, cover her mother's medical bills, and set herself up for a secure future. After some thought, she agrees. As the contract is signed, Lily enters a new world, one filled with luxury, power, and hidden agendas. The mansion she'll now call home is a far cry from her modest apartment. But Alexander's life, though filled with wealth, isn't what it seems. He's all confidence and charm in public, but behind closed doors, he's a man with emotional walls built high from past heartbreak and regret. Their agreement is clear: they will live together, pose as a married couple, and avoid media scrutiny. But what was meant to be a simple arrangement starts to get complicated. Despite herself, Lily begins to feel drawn to Alexander in ways she didn't expect. And though Alexander tries to keep things professional, he finds himself noticing more and more that Lily is not just another business arrangement. But Lily can't forget the nature of their agreement. This was never supposed to be real. It was supposed to be a lie, just a temporary solution. However, as time passes, Lily's feelings for Alexander grow in ways she didn't anticipate. She finds herself asking a question she never thought she'd face: what happens when the line between fake and real becomes so blurred, she's no longer sure which is which? So, let's pause for a moment. Can something that started as a lie ever turn into something real? Or are they simply trapped in a game that neither can win? When Lily agreed to Alexander's proposal, she never imagined how quickly her life would change. The first day she stepped into Alexander's mansion, she felt like she was walking into a completely different world. The grand entrance, the polished marble floors, and the towering ceilings all screamed wealth, but it was the silence that truly struck her. Everything felt perfectly ordered, like a space designed for appearances, not for living. Alexander greeted her in the hallway, his usual calm demeanor in place. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his hair neatly styled, his presence commanding. He looked every bit the billionaire mogul he was, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The man standing before her wasn't just a businessman. There was a heaviness to him, something that made her wonder if he was as cold as he appeared. As they walked together through the house, she noticed how carefully he avoided any personal conversation. Everything was about business, schedules, and responsibilities. Their arrangement was simple, no emotions, just the appearance of a perfect couple. It seemed easy enough, but as Lily settled into her new life, the lines between what was real and what wasn't began to blur. She found herself wondering about Alexander, his past, his motivations, and what lay behind the walls he had built around himself. But even more than that, she found herself noticing him in ways she hadn't expected. The first few days were a blur of meetings, dinners with business associates, and awkward, carefully orchestrated public appearances. Lily did her best to play the role of the perfect wife. She wore elegant dresses, smiled at the right times, and acted the part of a loving spouse. But when the cameras weren't around, the house felt oddly empty. The silence between them was deafening. Alexander never seemed to show any interest in her beyond their contract. He was always polite, always professional, but never personal. It was as if the two of them were strangers living under the same roof, bound by an agreement that neither of them had truly embraced. One evening, after a particularly long day, Lily found herself sitting in the living room, looking out at the sprawling grounds through the large windows. It was late, and the house was quiet. She couldn't help but wonder what her life had become. She was living in a mansion, surrounded by luxury, but there was no warmth, no connection. She wasn't sure if it was the contract that was holding her back or if it was something deeper. Maybe it was the feeling that she was living a lie. Just then, Alexander walked into the room. He was dressed casually, as if the weight of the day had finally left him. His usual cool demeanor seemed to soften, and for a brief moment, he looked almost human. He stopped when he saw her sitting by the window, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. Lily turned to face him, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to this side of him, the man who showed concern, even if it was fleeting. "I'm fine," she replied, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. The silence between them stretched out, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Alexander seemed to be contemplating something, but then he straightened up, his expression returning to its usual composed state. "If you need anything, let me know," he said before turning and walking away. Lily sat there for a long time after he left, her mind racing. That was the first time she had seen him show any sign of being more than just a businessman. And for the first time since she had moved in, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this arrangement could turn into something more. The days that followed were filled with the same routine, business events, dinners, and carefully arranged public appearances. But there was a shift in the air. Something had changed between them. Although Alexander was still distant, Lily began to notice small things, like the way he would always make sure she had everything she needed before he left the house, or the way he would check in on her after a particularly long day. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her question whether there was more to him than just the contract they had signed. Alexander, for his part, continued to keep his distance, but Lily could sense that he was no longer as indifferent as he had been before. And for the first time since their marriage of convenience began, she found herself wondering if maybe this arrangement wasn't just about money or appearances. Maybe, just maybe, they were both starting to feel something more. As she lay in bed that night, Lily realized something. This wasn't just a game anymore. There was a connection between them, a connection that neither of them had planned for. And though she didn't know where it would lead, she couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, their fake marriage was starting to become a little too real. As the days passed, the small changes between Lily and Alexander grew more apparent. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her wonder. She began to notice how he'd glance at her when he thought she wasn't looking, how he'd ask about her day, or how he'd casually touch her arm as they walked through the house together. These subtle actions, once insignificant, now felt loaded with meaning. Was he beginning to care for her? Or was he simply playing the part of the perfect husband in their pretend marriage? She couldn't tell. The boundaries between their real emotions and their fake marriage were becoming harder to distinguish. At a charity event one evening, things came to a head. The glittering ballroom was filled with high-profile guests, all of them watching Alexander as he made his way through the crowd, greeting people with his usual charm. Lily stood by his side, playing the role of the adoring wife. But something was different. Alexander's usual cold, business-focused persona seemed to slip, and Lily could see a flicker of something in his eyes, something unspoken. When they were briefly alone in a corner of the room, Alexander turned to her. "You look stunning tonight," he said, his voice quieter than usual. The compliment, though simple, felt heavy with unspoken emotions. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if it was the way he said it, or the look in his eyes, but for the first time, it felt like he wasn't just saying it out of obligation. He meant it. But before she could say anything, the moment was interrupted by a guest walking over to them, and the pretense of their marriage settled back into place. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes, forced smiles, and polite conversation. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had shifted. The moment had felt real, too real for comfort. After the event, as they were heading home, the silence in the car was thick. Lily sat quietly, trying to sort through the emotions swirling inside her. Alexander, for his part, kept his eyes on the road, his expression unreadable. The distance between them, once a cold professionalism, now felt charged, filled with the weight of unspoken words. "You did great tonight," Alexander finally said, breaking the silence. "You handled everything perfectly." Lily nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her mind was still on that brief moment, the way he looked at her, the warmth in his voice. When they arrived at the mansion, Alexander turned to her before heading inside. "Good night, Lily," he said, his voice softer than usual. She didn't reply immediately, unsure of what to say. She had 1,000 questions running through her mind, but the words just wouldn't come. Instead, she gave him a small smile and nodded, then walked into the house. As she lay in bed later that night, her mind kept replaying the moment over and over. She couldn't understand it. Was it just a fleeting moment, or was there something real between them? The line between their fake marriage and something deeper was becoming blurrier by the day. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Alexander was his usual self, businesslike, distant, and focused. But the tension from the night before lingered in the air. Lily tried to shake it off. She reminded herself that this was just a contract, a business arrangement. She had to keep her emotions in check. But it was harder than she thought. The more time she spent with Alexander, the more she saw the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Beneath his cold exterior was a man who was hurting, someone who had built walls around himself to protect against the pain of his past. Lily began to feel a strange connection to him, one that went beyond their agreement. She wasn't sure if it was compassion, empathy, or something more, but she couldn't deny the way her feelings for him were growing. Meanwhile, Alexander seemed to be struggling with his own feelings. He continued to keep his distance, but Lily could see the subtle signs, how he'd always make sure she was comfortable, how he'd check on her after a long day, how his eyes would soften when he looked at her. She couldn't help but wonder if he was starting to feel something for her too. But the reality of their situation kept creeping in. This was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a marriage of convenience, nothing more. They both had their reasons for entering into it, and they both had a clear understanding of the rules. But the more time passed, the harder it became to ignore the feelings growing between them. That night, after dinner, as they sat on the terrace overlooking the garden, the tension between them was palpable. Alexander turned to her, his gaze intense. "Lily," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk about this." The words hung in the air, and Lily's heart raced. What was he about to say? Had he come to the same conclusion that she had? Was their marriage becoming more than just a contract? She didn't know, but one thing was clear, whatever happened next would change everything. The night air was cool, and the distant sounds of the city seemed muted against the silence of the mansion. Lily sat on the terrace with Alexander, the two of them alone for the first time in days, the tension between them thick and undeniable. She could feel her heart racing, her breath shallow as she waited for him to speak. For a moment, Alexander just looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as though trying to find the right words. Lily could see the battle in his expression. There was something he needed to say, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. "Lily," he finally said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "I know we made a deal. This was supposed to be just a business arrangement, but," he trailed off, his gaze shifting away as though he was trying to gather his thoughts. Lily's mind raced. Was he finally acknowledging what had been building between them? Was he about to confess that he, too, felt something beyond their contract? She didn't know what to expect, but her heart couldn't help but hope. "But what?" she asked, her voice soft, almost uncertain. Alexander took a deep breath before continuing. "I didn't expect this to happen," he said, his words coming out slower, more measured. "I didn't expect to feel anything. But it's becoming harder to ignore. What started as a business arrangement is turning into something more." Lily's chest tightened, her pulse quickening. He was admitting it. He was finally saying it out loud. For a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, standing on the precipice of something new, something neither of them had anticipated. But just as quickly as the moment arrived, Alexander pulled back. "I don't know what this means," he said, his voice guarded again, the walls he had so carefully constructed returning. "I don't know where this is going, but I can't keep pretending it's just a contract anymore." The words hung in the air, and Lily felt a pang of disappointment, though she tried not to show it. She had hoped for more clarity, more direction. Instead, she was left with questions, about him, about them, about the future. "So, what does that mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander turned his gaze to her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "It means that we're both in uncharted territory," he replied. "We're both trying to figure out what this is. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm not feeling something. I just need time to process it." The silence between them stretched on, thick and heavy. Lily didn't know what to say. She had her own feelings, her own uncertainties, but part of her wanted to reach out to him, to bridge the gap between them. But another part of her hesitated, unsure whether this was just another fleeting moment or if it was something real. She had to be careful. She had to protect herself. "I understand," she said finally, her voice steady but her heart heavy. "I'm not rushing into anything either. I think we both need time to figure this out." Alexander nodded, his expression softening for a moment. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. "But whatever happens, we're in this together, okay?" Lily looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of certainty. But there was none. Only the same guarded look he always wore, the man who had everything, yet kept everyone at arm's length. She nodded slowly, even though a part of her still wasn't sure what to make of his words. "Okay," she said, the words sounding final in the quiet of the night. They sat in silence for a while longer, the sound of crickets filling the air as they both lost themselves in thought. Neither of them knew what the future held. They had started this arrangement with no expectations, no promises, just two people who needed something from each other. But now, with the admission that their feelings were changing, the path forward seemed unclear. Was this the beginning of something real? Or was it just a fleeting moment that would fade once the reality of their situation set in? For the rest of the evening, neither of them spoke much. It was as though the conversation had opened up a new chapter, one that neither of them was ready to fully face. As Lily lay in bed later that night, she couldn't help but think about Alexander's words. They were both in this together. But together for how long? And what would happen when the lines between their fake marriage and real emotions could no longer be ignored? She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure: things had changed, and there was no turning back now. The following days were a strange blend of normalcy and tension. Lily went through the motions of their arrangement, attending events, dinners, and meetings, always by Alexander's side. The mansion, once unfamiliar, had become her home. But even as the days passed, the weight of what had transpired between them lingered in the air, like an unspoken truth neither of them wanted to face. They hadn't discussed it again, neither the words he had said nor the feelings they both were clearly trying to suppress. Their time together had grown more complicated. Lily began to notice the subtle shifts in Alexander's behavior. He was still the same, distant and cold on the outside, but there were moments, small, fleeting moments, that told a different story. Like the way he would glance at her when he thought she wasn't looking, or the way he would linger a bit longer than necessary when she was in the room. It was as if he was trying to figure out what was happening between them, just as she was. One morning, they found themselves alone in the kitchen, a rare moment without anyone else around. Lily was making coffee, trying to shake off the restless feeling that had been settling in her chest for days. Alexander stood by the counter, watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "Lily," he said, his voice breaking the silence. She turned to face him, her pulse quickening. "We need to talk about what happened," he continued, his tone serious. Her stomach dropped at his words. She had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel all too real. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to sound calm, though inside, she was anything but. Alexander took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "I can't keep pretending this is just a contract," he said. "I know we agreed to keep things professional, but I can't ignore how I feel anymore." Lily's breath caught in her throat. Was this it? Was he finally admitting that he had feelings for her? Or was he going to pull away, distancing himself again? The uncertainty made her heart ache. "I don't know what this is either," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "But I don't want to keep pretending either." Alexander looked at her for a long moment, as though he was weighing his next words. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower now. "I don't want to rush into anything. But I don't want to lose what we have either. I think we need to figure this out, together. I don't know where it's going, but I know I want to find out." Lily nodded, a mixture of relief and uncertainty flooding her at his words. It wasn't a clear answer, but it was more than she had hoped for. They had crossed a line, and now, there was no turning back. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Alexander reached out, his hand brushing against hers in a rare, intimate gesture. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her heart race. "Now, we take it one day at a time," he said softly. "We see where this goes, without any pressure. But no more pretending. Not between us." The simple act of his touch sent a spark of warmth through her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. The days that followed were quieter, less hectic. They spent more time together, but there was an air of caution between them, as though they were both afraid to push too far too fast. Lily found herself watching Alexander more closely, paying attention to the little things he did. The way he took care of her when she was sick, or how he made sure she had everything she needed without asking. It wasn't grand gestures, but it was enough to make her realize that this wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. Alexander had changed, and so had she. They were no longer just playing the part of a married couple. There was something deeper now, something real. But even as they grew closer, there were still moments of hesitation. Moments when one of them would pull back, afraid to fully embrace what was happening. Lily couldn't help but wonder if it was because neither of them truly knew how to navigate this new territory. Neither of them had ever been in a relationship like this before, one that started out as a contract, but was slowly turning into something much more. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city, Alexander turned to her with a serious expression. "Lily," he said, his voice low. "I need to know something. Are you in this? For real? Or are you just going along with it because of the money, or because you feel obligated?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She had never stopped to think about it in those terms. Was she in this because of the money? Because of the security it brought her family? Or had she begun to feel something real for Alexander? She looked at him for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know that I want to find out. I want to see where this goes. And I don't want to pretend anymore." Alexander stared at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. "We'll figure it out together." The weight of his words settled in, and for the first time, Lily felt like they were both on the same page. They weren't pretending anymore. They were in this together, and they were going to find out what it meant, no matter where it led. As the days went on, something shifted between Lily and Alexander. It was subtle at first, these small moments that neither of them could ignore. They no longer went through the motions of their arrangement just for show. There were no more forced smiles. No more pretending to be the perfect couple. Instead, they found themselves spending more time together, talking more, understanding each other in ways they hadn't before. They still hadn't defined what was happening between them. Was it love, or was it just the result of spending so much time together in a situation neither of them had ever expected? Lily couldn't be sure, but she knew one thing for certain: the connection between them was growing deeper, more real. One afternoon, Alexander suggested they go for a drive. It was the first time he had suggested anything that wasn't part of their usual routine, and Lily was surprised at how excited she felt. They didn't have a specific destination in mind, just a quiet escape from the world they had been living in for so long. As they drove through the countryside, Lily couldn't help but notice the way Alexander looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. His gaze, usually so controlled, was soft now, almost curious. He seemed like a man at a crossroads, uncertain of where he was headed, yet willing to take the next step anyway. "It's nice out here," Lily said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Alexander glanced at her, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I thought you might like it," he replied. They drove for hours, winding through small towns, stopping at local cafes, and taking in the peaceful scenery. For the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't focused on business, public appearances, or expectations. They were just two people, no pretense, no contract. When they stopped for lunch at a small diner, the waitress smiled at them warmly, recognizing Alexander. But instead of retreating into the public persona he'd worn for so long, Alexander seemed different. He was more relaxed, more at ease. He wasn't the billionaire businessman today. He was just a man, sitting in a small booth with a woman who was no longer just his wife on paper. After lunch, they sat outside on a bench, watching the sun begin to set. It was one of those rare moments where time seemed to stand still, and for a few seconds, neither of them said anything. It was as if they both realized that this wasn't just a fleeting day trip. Something was changing between them, something that was real, no matter how hard they tried to deny it. "You know," Alexander said after a long pause, his voice quiet, "this feels different. In a good way." Lily turned to him, her heart beating faster. "What do you mean?" she asked. He met her gaze, his eyes holding a depth of emotion she hadn't seen before. "I mean, this, us, feels real now. Not just some act we're putting on for the world. But something that's actually happening between us. And it scares me," he admitted, his voice dropping a little. Lily was taken aback by his words. She had been feeling the same way, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so much more intense, so much more real. She had spent so long trying to compartmentalize her feelings, convincing herself that this was just business. But now, it was hard to ignore the truth. "I'm scared too," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to run away from this. Whatever it is, I don't want to push it away anymore." There was a long silence, and for the first time in their entire arrangement, Lily felt the walls between them begin to crumble. They weren't just two people living out a contract anymore. They were two people who had been changed by each other, by their time together, by the experiences they had shared. Alexander looked at her, his eyes searching hers as if trying to understand everything she was feeling. "So, what do we do now?" he asked, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. Lily smiled, her heart full. "We take it one day at a time," she said. "We don't have to have all the answers right now. But we can stop pretending. We can start being real." Alexander nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in. "You're right," he said quietly. "No more pretending. Whatever happens next, it's real. As they sat there, watching the last light of the day fade away, Lily realized that things had changed. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't want to go back. She wanted to see where this could lead, where they could go, together. For the first time, the future didn't feel so uncertain. It felt full of possibility. The days after their trip were filled with a new sense of understanding between Lily and Alexander. No longer just a business arrangement, their relationship began to shift into something that neither of them had expected. They began spending more time together outside of their public obligations, finding moments to connect without the pressure of the world watching. It wasn't perfect, and they both had their moments of hesitation, but something real was growing between them, something that neither of them was ready to fully define yet. Alexander was still guarded, but his walls were starting to crack. Lily could see it in the way he looked at her now, how he no longer kept his distance as he had at the beginning. He'd catch her eye in a crowded room, his gaze lingering longer than necessary, and sometimes, when they were alone, she'd catch a glimpse of the man he was beneath the polished billionaire exterior, a man who had been hurt, who was still learning to trust. One evening, as they sat on the couch in the living room, Alexander turned to her. "Lily," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about us. And I think I need to be honest with you." His words made her heart skip a beat. Was this the moment when he would finally admit what they both had been dancing around for weeks? She met his gaze, her heart in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady, though inside, she was a whirlwind of emotions. Alexander paused for a long moment, his eyes searching hers, and when he finally spoke, it was as if the words had been weighing on him for a long time. "I'm not sure where this is going, but I can't keep pretending that it's just a contract anymore. I care about you, Lily. More than I thought possible. And I don't want to lose that." Lily's breath caught in her chest. The words she had been waiting to hear, the words she had been afraid to say herself, were finally spoken. She had known, deep down, that there was something between them, something real, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel all the more real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if they were both processing the weight of his confession, trying to figure out what it meant for them. Lily's mind raced. She had spent so long keeping her emotions in check, telling herself that this was just a temporary arrangement. But now, it seemed impossible to deny that her feelings for him had grown into something much deeper. She didn't know where this was headed, but she was no longer afraid. She didn't want to walk away from this. Not now, not when they had come this far. "I care about you too, Alexander," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what this is, but I don't want to ignore it anymore. I don't want to pretend that it's just a contract." His expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand in his. "I'm not asking for anything to change overnight," he said, his voice gentle. "But I don't want to keep pretending we don't have something real. I just need to know you're in this with me, for real." She nodded slowly, her heart full. "I am," she said quietly. "I'm in this with you." The room seemed to hold its breath as the weight of their words settled in the space between them. There was no turning back now. Whatever had started as a simple contract was no longer just that. It was something more. And though they didn't know what the future held, they both knew one thing for sure, they were ready to face it together. As Alexander gently pulled her closer, Lily realized that they had crossed a line they could never uncross. But instead of fear, she felt hope. Hope for the future, hope for what was to come. They were no longer just pretending. They were finally being real. The days that followed felt different, almost as if the air between them had shifted in a way neither of them could fully understand. They still had their public appearances, their meetings, their busy lives. But there was a new layer to everything they did, a quiet acknowledgement of something real growing between them. Lily no longer felt the need to hold back, to keep her emotions under tight control. When she was with Alexander, it was easier to be herself. She didn't have to pretend, and neither did he. They started sharing more than just casual conversation. They began to open up about their pasts, their fears, and their dreams. For the first time, Lily felt like she was getting to know the man behind the business persona, and what she found was a side of Alexander she hadn't expected, someone vulnerable, someone with a deep capacity for caring, even if he didn't always show it. But there were still moments of hesitation, moments when one of them would pull back, unsure of where this was going. It was as if they were both testing the waters, afraid to dive in too deeply. One evening, as they sat in the living room after dinner, Alexander turned to her, his expression more serious than usual. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking about everything. About us." She met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. She could feel the weight of his words even before he spoke them. "I think it's time we face the truth. We can't keep pretending this isn't real." Lily's breath caught in her chest. She had been waiting for him to say something like this, but hearing it made everything feel so much more permanent. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "I mean that what we have, what we're building, isn't just a contract anymore. It's not just a business arrangement. I care about you, Lily. And I need you to know that. This is real." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a space that felt full of possibility. Lily's mind raced. She had spent so long telling herself this was just temporary, that she couldn't let her feelings get in the way of what was supposed to be a professional arrangement. But now, with the words hanging between them, it felt impossible to deny the truth. She had fallen for him, in a way she hadn't expected. "I care about you too, Alexander," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not pretending anymore. I know what this is, and I'm ready to face it." The moment felt like a turning point, a moment of clarity that neither of them could ignore. Alexander reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a simple but meaningful gesture. He looked at her with such intensity, his eyes filled with emotion. "So what do we do now?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Lily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his question. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't ready to walk away. "We move forward," she said firmly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Together. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Alexander nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Together," he repeated. In that moment, it felt like everything had shifted. They weren't just two people in a contract anymore. They weren't pretending to be something they weren't. They were building something real, something that neither of them had expected, but both of them wanted. And as they sat there, their hands still intertwined, Lily knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a team. There was no going back now. Only forward. Weeks passed, and the changes between Lily and Alexander became undeniable. What had started as a business arrangement, a contract on paper, had transformed into something far deeper. They no longer felt like strangers merely playing a role. They had become partners, companions in a way neither of them had expected. Their connection, though still in its early stages, was real. They were building a life together, not out of obligation, but out of a mutual understanding and respect for one another. They learned to share the small moments, quiet mornings together, long conversations late into the night, and even the awkward silences that were no longer uncomfortable. Their relationship had turned into something that felt almost natural, even though both of them had started this journey with no intention of falling in love. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below, Alexander turned to Lily, a soft smile on his lips. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I would be here. I never thought this would be my life." Lily looked at him, her heart warm. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean..." He paused, searching for the right words. "I never thought I'd find someone I could actually be myself with. I thought I was fine on my own. But you've shown me that there's more to life than just business and success. There's something real here, something worth fighting for." His words made Lily's chest tighten. For so long, they had kept their emotions at arm's length, unsure of what was happening between them. But now, it felt like they had finally reached a place of understanding, a place where they both knew the truth. They had fallen for each other, and it wasn't just because of the contract they had signed. It was because of who they were together. "I feel the same," Lily replied softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I never expected this either. I thought I was just trying to survive, just trying to get through everything. But now, I can't imagine my life without you in it." Alexander's expression softened, and he reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Then we're in this together," he said, his voice full of conviction. "No more pretending. No more hiding from what's real." Lily smiled, her heart full. They had come so far from where they had started, and though there were still challenges ahead, she knew that they could face them together. They had already proven that they could trust each other, that they could open up and be vulnerable, something neither of them had been able to do with anyone else before. As they sat in the quiet of the evening, hand in hand, they knew that their journey wasn't over. They had started with a contract, but they had ended up with something far more powerful, a connection that could not be broken. They had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. But this time, there was no fear. Only hope, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. As the stars shone above them, they realized that what they had now was real. And that was all that mattered.